Welcome and thank you everyone for joining today's session. I've got a few housekeeping items to take care of before we get underway. So if you can indulge me for a few moments, it'd be greatly appreciated. If I can ask you, please start familiarizing yourself with our virtual conference tool today. Just take a moment and see if you can find the chat window. And while you're there, drop us a note. Let us know where you're joining us from today. As we get into the meat of today's session, I know you're all going to have questions and conversation topics that you want to address. So please do post those in the Q&A tool, not the chat. Put those in the Q&A bar, and we will make it easier for us to find them, and then we can bring those up later on in the session towards the latter half. Several events just to bring to your attention. We have some future events through IIoT World. We have our Smart Cities Day, which will be March 10th, 2022. The next manufacturing day, which will be May 12th, 2022, we'll have an energy day on June 9th, 2022, once again. And we'll be wrapping up the latter part of the year with a cybersecurity focus on ICS on October 12th. Our current track will run for about 55 minutes and promise to have you out of here on time for your next session. Just a quick comment as well, it would not be possible to run these virtual conferences without our sponsors. So special thanks to Adolis, Fortinet, Hitachi Vantara, HiveMQ, Fulcrum, Eurotech, Keyfactor, Machine Metrics, Litmus, Vertex, Trend Micro, Siemens, Upkeep, Ursaleo, and Ubuntu. And one last item before we get into our session. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, please allow me to share a little bit about IIoT World. IIoT World is a leading authority on industrial IoT. We're a digital media outlet bringing the latest industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT as we call it, virtual conferences and content to a global community of 279,000 plus decision makers and influencers globally. IIoT World focuses on delivering daily insights on the industrial Internet of Things across multiple verticals. Online, IIoT World curates a series of virtual events that punctuate the calendar and draw thousands of delegates, including our IIoT World Day event today that you're attending. So housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to introduce our topic of the day and our speakers. So this session is augmented reality on the manufacturing floor. And the speakers that are joining us today are John Burton, who we will call John B. And he's the CEO of Ursaleo, which is a San Francisco-based startup that focuses on digital twins and industrial applications, including the use of AR, or augmented reality. John Jerkowitz, is Director of Innovation for an industrial builder, Wallbridge, and has tested various augmented reality and IIoT technologies as they relate to mega construction projects. And lastly, we have Mark Sage. Mark is the Executive Director of the AR for Enterprise Alliance, or AREA, the only global membership-funded nonprofit alliance dedicated to helping accelerate the adoption of enterprise augmented reality by supporting the growth of a comprehensive ecosystem. So gentlemen, welcome.
Hi.
All right, so John B., perhaps before we dive into the weeds, can you set the stage for us from a conversation perspective? Give us a baseline on augmented reality. When we say AR, what are we talking about in the context of the manufacturing floor?
Yeah, hi, Greg. I think that there's two main sort of tracks when you talk about AR in the industrial world. Obviously, we all know what AR is. It's wearing something or looking at something on a tablet, which overlays digital information on the real world, so you can see them both simultaneously. Fundamentally, there's two different ways of doing it. There's overlay AR, where whatever we're digitally overlaying is synchronized with a real piece of equipment. So we're enhancing a real piece of equipment, but we're making sure that digital information appears in the right place and it's overlaid on the physical equipment. The other type of AR, which we call adjacent, is where you have a piece of equipment and then you create a digital copy of it, probably next to it on the floor. So you're on the shop floor or out in the field and you have a electric pump in front of you. You create a augmented reality version of that electric pump, and then manipulation on that can be used to apply information to the real thing. So kind of two different ways of looking at it.
Got it. I think that helps. Maybe just to kick the dialogue off, if we take a look at a macro perspective, what problems can we address? What is the world experiencing right now in the manufacturing realm that AR can help with? And I'd like to get all three of your perspectives on this. So John J., let's start with you. Give us an example of something that this is a great application to resolve an issue.
Certainly training. We are hiring and have, the scarcity of skilled trades. So we want to rapidly bring people up to speed on what's happening live or on a job on a large mega project. There might be open holes, digging, traffic areas where if you have thousands of workers on a site where the heavy traffic hauling is occurring, where there could be, hazards. So awareness of real-time hazards. Also, let's say you've got open trenches where you want to go to a certain valve or a certain box, wayfinding. So wayfinding, and even in simple applications like we've talked about training, or we've worked actually with Caterpillar on their immersive training for equipment. But we see it a little bit deeper with, are you putting up shoring and installations properly as you leave the area and sending alerts if you hadn't followed protocol or your pre-task analysis, that type of thing.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense then, even along the lines of the thrilling days of yesteryear, when you dial 811 and think before you dig type of concepts, except in the plant floor. That's what we're.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of hazards where computer vision is found to be useful. And we've been studying, types of near miss incidents, crush incidents, potential hazards before they happen, even projecting trajectories on where a vehicle might go so that it could send an alert. So it's like a heads up so that you can avoid equipment on people strikes and crush points.
All good things, definitely. John B., what about from your perspective? What are the issues that we're addressing here?
So I totally agree with John J. that the training is definitely a big one. The other one that we see a lot of is maintenance, and specifically in our case, remote maintenance. So we have a customer base where their installation might be 500 miles away from headquarters. When there's an issue, they can, the old days they drive out there, which obviously is expensive and time consuming. Through AR with collaboration, being able to guide somebody through a remote maintenance without having to do that 500-mile trip is obviously going to be much more efficient. So the training and collaboration, I think, are the two big ones we see.
Mark, how about from your perspective? What did we miss? What topics are out there that the AR is a great peanut butter to jelly combo for?
Well, there's quite a few, Greg, but the one I'm going to focus on, particularly thinking about the manufacturing floor, is the kind of compliance use case. JB talked a little bit about it in terms of step-by-step guide. What we're beginning to see in the industry now is being able to take that a step further, where you can actually show the person's completed the task, that task has been correctly completed, and it moves on to the next step. And this is great in kind of industries that have a heavy compliance part. You know that the work's been done. It's also easy to collect that information and put it in an easy to search format as well. So kind of the compliance use case, I think on the manufacturing floor, is something we'll see continue to grow and offer some real benefit. What I was going to do, just to really finish off the piece, in the search box is one of the things that we've been doing in the area, is defining a whole bunch of different use cases or problems that can be solved. So, some of them are very relevant to the manufacturing floor, some of them, not quite as relevant, but, it's an opportunity to define some generic problems that AR can actually solve. So I pop that in the chat box for people.
Great. So invite everyone to take a peek at that. Maybe not right now.
No, not now. No, definitely not now.
But definitely peel that onion back and take a look. So you hit on a point as we start to peel this onion back even deeper. I mean, the augmented reality piece makes a lot of sense. It's how do you integrate that real world information? Where's that data coming from? So talk to me a little bit about, what are the sensors, what are the vision tools, the things that are actually getting this information and processing it to get it to that state.
Someone particular, Greg? Yeah.
I see. I'm going to say John J. Okay, just to kick it off. So that awkward silence of, I don't want to trump the other guy's comments.
So you're asking what are the tools to get us there?
Exactly. I mean, talking about the tools, the sensors, the
Yeah,
the vision
this
is.
was old school because this is one of them right here. But this is we see it as a combination, I would say, of laser range finding. So LIDAR. I've got some of those tools here. Intel RealSense we've been playing with. Things that you can easily add that you know are scalable. And I would say the other part of the tools is your mesh network. How are you going to have job site connectivity? You know, if you're in a building that already exists, that's a little bit easier if you've got some type of Wi-Fi, but you want to make sure you're not filling up the spectrum and being kind to the client or the whoever, what processes they're running equipment on. So 2.4 could be a problem. So we look at spectrum and you know, so the tools are a combination of hardware and also your mesh network. And then sensors, wayfinding, Alice symbols, QR codes, all these things to give you markers on where you are so that you're not lost.
Anything to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff that JJ says is great. You know, content is really important. I think we're seeing, and JB mentioned it before about remote assistance. You know, companies are kind of able to do a standalone system for that at the moment. But where companies can really benefit is where they plug into their management systems, whatever it is, ERP, MESs and stuff like that. And like you said, the sensor data. So it actually becomes part of their overall management of their processes and their business. Yeah, and if we're really brutal, you could argue that AR is just being able to visualize that information, but being able to do that in a hands-free way, you know, it's kind of cool. Now, it doesn't have to be hands-free. You know, we probably talk more about tablets and phones and other kind of bits and pieces, but, you know, being able to plug into the latest information, make sure that's contextual, relevant, and up to date. It's the kind of problems that workers, you know, have had for years and years. Either have to go off and look at a diagram or try and go to a PC or go and chat to somebody and things like that. If we can get that information to them when they need it, in the right way, and if they make any changes to it, it gets updated. Well, that's really making your organization very efficient. So certainly the content part is something that things need to be carefully thought of and how you integrate into that.
So you've got kind of a feel, we've set the stage for what's available right now. How about in terms of advanced visualization? What does the future state look like? What are we going to see, you know, 1, 2, 5 years from now? And give me the best shot at your crystal ball if you can. Maybe John B, if you want to kick things off around that.
Yeah, so I think one of the really interesting dynamics that's really happened and is happening more and more in the last year, the gaming guys, you know, Unity, Unreal, Amazon has just made a big announcement, are definitely moving into the industrial space. And when they do that, they want to enable augmented reality as part of their suite of tools. So if you look at Unity Reflect now, I mean, that's pretty much got AR built into it. I mean, you still got plenty of work to do. I think to John Jay's point about, you know, bandwidth on the job site and how do you minimize, you know, how much data you need to send, the gaming tools actually really, really useful for that. You can take CAD, you can compress it down dramatically to get it into a gaming engine. You can preload that onto a tablet or onto a, you know, a HoloLens or something like that. And then the data you're having to send when somebody's using that model, that, you know, that AR model, can actually be pretty minimal. Sensor data doesn't take up a lot of bandwidth. I mean, sensor data is usually a few kilobytes a second. So that, you know, I think that trend is going to continue. I think AR is going to move in the field. It's going to be rendered using gaming technology, and that doesn't stress the hardware nearly as much. You're going to combine it with sensor data. You're going to combine it with geophysical data. You're going to combine it with whatever data you want. But that really, I think, opens up the world to, you know, reasonable bandwidth applications that are very, very rich. So I talk to Unity a lot. Those guys they're going full bore into augmented reality.
So that kind of leads me to another, the flip side of that. Then, I mean, what are some of the challenges associated with this? I mean, it sounds like bandwidth can be an issue, and connectivity. If we go back to the mesh network piece of this, so how are you? What are your thoughts? And if each of you can comment on that, or what are the limiting factors right now that we're going to need to address to move this platform forward?
GPU, so graphic processor, one of the limiting factors on the hardware is, you know, these things overheat. In the old days, we had desktops where we had big graphics cards that could handle and process all this. Now you're trying to compress that into a wearable. And when you need your hands free, you also don't need your hands monkeying around with the hardware. So things overheat. GPU is the challenge. I think with web GPUs evolution, that'll be better. And certainly the chips that Apple's designing are certainly coming a long way, and they're processing everything through one chip. That's extraordinary. So I think you're talking 5 years out. I would think that becomes like the power of a wearable device is now as powerful as a Dell Precision or a powerful laptop. And along with that is battery consumption. And, you know, as we move from lithium ion to lithium sulfur batteries and you get better batteries that have more capacity, I could see that unfolding in 5 years.
You're gonna say something, Mark? You look like you want to cut you off.
Yeah, I was going to. Sorry, and I didn't want to.
No, go for it.
I agree what John Jay is saying, but we talk a lot within the area. So within the area organization itself, we have companies that are deploying the technology. So, you know, again, just to name a few, but companies like Boeing and Medtronic, there are all sorts of different industries. And then the providers, and again, a whole bunch of different providers and a bunch of non-commercial organizations are kind of supporting the ecosystem. And we talk a lot, it's a term I think I'd like to come up with, but I didn't, but pilot purgatory. So the kind of issue is that people are, you know, they're trying the stuff out. You know, they're doing little trials. They have a couple of people with a couple of devices, whatever they are, and stuff like that. And what we find, whilst there's some technology things, and John Jay has definitely talked about a few of those, but there's also some business challenges. There's a whole bunch of them, and that need to be thought about. They're not insurmountable in any kind of way, but we have things like safety, security, having a kind of a single set of requirements, the human factors part, you know, the UX and UI, not both from what you see, but also having these devices on your, I think we've got some work to do that. Sorry, in the other one, I should have finished that little talk about some of the challenges is about what I call change management. It's about working with the people who are going to be using a solution, but also convincing the stakeholders that they need to invest in it. You know, so we've been doing lots of work in those kind of spaces to help companies really understand how to do that. You know, it's a case of setting some best practice or processes to do that. And the companies that have done it and have cracked, you know, some of those challenges are getting some real ROI and some real benefit from it. So in summary, I think, Greg, is, you know, there are some technical challenges. I also think there's some kind of business challenges and, you know, opportunities to overcome that. And if you do that, you know, you will definitely get some ROI and benefit from deploying AR in your organization.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, if you don't mind, Greg.
Sure, please.
I think AR is a base technology. You know, you can get into AR, and there's, like we say, there's the hardware challenge, there's the connectivity challenge, there's how do you render this stuff and actually get the software side of it challenge. Once those are kind of solved, you've actually got to build an application on top of it. You know, there's got to be step by step, or there's got to be something else that actually makes this useful. AR is not a fundamentally, you know, it's not a solution in itself. There's got to be something built on top of it. Just a quick example, and I'm going to do the same as Mark and drop it in chat. You know, is the one we do about remote collaboration. We had to build a whole collaboration system around AR to make it work. We created a little video just showing how that works. So I'll put that one into chat as well. But that, for me, he's exactly right. The business case means you have to build a solution around AR to actually make it a useful technology. Once you do that, yes, I think ROI starts to happen. So I put that in chat.
Great. No, thank you. Once again, everybody take a peek at that once we wrap up later, because it's a powerful video. Actually, I watched it earlier, so I think you won't be disappointed. So talk to me about some of the other areas, other sectors, or I guess what you call the adoption locations, if you will, within organizations. I know we're looking at manufacturing. We've talked a little bit about that one. How about health and safety, logistics, energy? I mean, where are you guys seeing this pick up and start to get traction more or less?
I'm construction industry, definitely, but I'll let John Jay talk about that. But, the idea of holding up a tablet and seeing what's inside a wall, that's a perfect AR application.
We've used AR for things that are covered up, like you just described, especially if it's in a factory that's going to change, like these factory of the future. And more of our new factories that we're designing and building are built for that kind of iteration. So they're going to change. So knowing what's in the floor when you're drilling and coring matters. So, but really, I think fundamentally AR matters also when it's hands-free, when it allows your hands to be used. So I'm kind of falling back to that training exercise, but I was trying to teach someone how to use a structured light sensor. And when they put on an AR headset, it was real easy for me to show them then on the structured light sensor how it works and how to use it. And so the quickness, the speed of learning is improved. That's why we like it for training exercises. But also if you're doing anything complex where you're wiring or fixing or working on hydraulics or printed circuit boards or any of that kind of stuff, where having your hands free are really an advantage, is then where you're going to see value in AR.
Well,
agree.
you're going to say something? Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, and I absolutely agree with John Jay, but I don't think it's just about the hands-free part. We're seeing companies using projection AR is another possible solution. And a question I get asked a lot is, how do I get going? How do I get started? And there are billions of devices out there, basically in your pocket at the moment, phones and tablets. So the ability to kind of mock something up, use that as a starting point, use that to show some of the benefits, but what AR can be used for. And then of course it's building on that, it's building that business case, it's taking it to the next level by using wearable devices and things like that. So yeah, I kind of seen some questions coming through about how do you get started. To me, really is if you can solve real business problems, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's just not technology for the technology's sake. Yeah, but kind of start simple, use the devices that are already there, be able to show that, and then you can grow that into bigger solutions, which, yeah, definitely could utilize wearable devices as well.
I think that's a great point. And I know from our audience standpoint, I mean, we run a spectrum, right? You've got everyone from mom and pop startups in the basement to, Fortune, 50 organizations that have got divisions globally. What opportunities are there for some of the smaller groups that are out there, the smaller entities? If I'm a small manufacturing firm in the Northeast, is this something that has tangible benefits for me? Should I be looking at it? Talk to me a little bit about the scale of operations and how this fits in, if you could.
I think.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Greg, you're gonna have to tell us who's going to respond. I think anybody can benefit. I mean, the barriers to entry from a financial point of view are relatively high at the moment. If you try to build your own AR using the Unity SDK or the Vuforia SDK, it's a pretty significant undertaking. So for a small manufacturer, my recommendation is, work with a company that offers you AR on a platter. And yes, you're going to pay more per unit, or your monthly fee is going to be higher. But you're not going to go out and hire three graphic designers, spend 50K on an SDK, spend 12 months, doing development. So for smaller guys, try to find off-the-shelf solutions, and then there is ROI based on that. The bigger guys probably have teams in-house who can use SDKs to do it themselves. But even there, I would suggest it may not be a good use of their time. But the barriers to entry is really, if you go out and look at Vuforia, you go out and look at Unity, they make it sound like it's super easy. Just buy this tool, click a few buttons, and you've got AR. It ain't that simple. There's an awful lot to it. And getting an off-the-shelf solution, who've already targeted the hardware, they've already figured out how to import the models, they've already figured out how to deliver the content, I think is actually really useful.
Well, going back,
sorry, I'm going to just respond a little bit, and I agree, John, to a certain extent, but it's all about, and one thing, it's important to think about is the use case, the problem being solved. So things like potentially remote assistance, and John B kind of mentioned that before, being able to call somebody up and solve a problem. I think that is slightly easier to do, and something you could potentially get started with. Some of the companies, especially in the COVID times, were offering their solutions for free to start with. So companies that couldn't go into the manufacturing kind of plant, or they had a limited staff there. And that's where you can see a real quick ROI, not having to travel. You get the CO2 bit thrown in as well, able less downtime and stuff like that. So you're right, there's potentially off-the-shelf solutions that can do that. But it's a case of being really clear on the ROI and the use case that you're trying to solve. And that's where, again, we've done a lot of work in the area of we've actually created an ROI calculator for people to use. It's on the area website as well. So go and use it, try and work with somebody who can provide the services so you can get the cost part. But very quickly you can start to work through a good benefit case.
I'm just scanning through the questions, and I know generally we take them at the end, but there's a few here that we can kind of dovetail in as we're going. Patrick's got a question. He says, if companies have already started down the path of creating a digital twin, when do you think that AR or VR is easier to achieve by helping them visualize their twins in action? So it seems like they go hand in hand is what he's saying. So at what point do you pull the trigger on this? Maybe John B., if you could, I think it's your sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, first off, digital twins is a bit of an overused term. So I think what the question is talking about digital twins as in 3D models that look like the real thing. So let's make that assumption. Once you have that digital twin, augmented reality is still another step. But I think it's once you have the digital twin, it becomes much easier to get to augmented reality. But I would still recommend you find somebody who can help you with that step, or if you've got a big development team internally, expect to take 3 months and have a team of 2 or 3 working on it to get to AR. Mark will tell you, you've got to make the decision yourself based on a business case and an ROI. But to go from just having a digital twin, which is some sort of 3D rendering of a piece of equipment, to having a augmented reality rendering of that piece of equipment is an engineering step.
If that answered it, Patrick, feel free. I look, you got a couple other comments in here as well. So jump back in if you want some additional detail. We talked about communications on this earlier too, in terms of how the information is flowing back and forth. What's the crystal ball say about the satellite issues around here, communications? I know a lot of it's Wi-Fi that we're talking about in mesh networks within organizations. But what are some of the other technologies that are out there that may be looming opportunity? John, Jay, maybe if you've got a thought on that.
So rephrase that as you're saying, what are the available technologies going forward, or give me some more on that. What do you mean?
Sure. If we're using a mesh network now or Wi-Fi within a plant, and there's some limitations, I know there's a lot of talk, and it seems like there's been a lot of talk about satellite communications and opportunities. What are some of the
okay, so satellite works outside, and inside you're limited to you can go cellular, but you're really non-cellular unless you're setting up amplifiers and all that. Non-cellular 5G, which Wirepass would be an example of that. And BLE, unfortunately, you can saturate the area with too many devices, and they're just noisy all the time. So I think going forward, having things that are more not so noisy, that are more precise, that are more effective locally, is where it has to go, especially on the factory floor where you're dealing with thousands of things instead of just a few hundred.
Makes sense. Mark, any thoughts on that?
I was just going to add, and I think there's been some chatter in the chat box as well, kind of 5G as a technology. Lots of kind of questions about 5G and AR and how does it benefit and stuff like that. And kind of through the area, we've actually done a piece of research, which there's a kind of a high level summary of it, or a high level bit. Yeah, there's work definitely to be done, but I think enabling 5G is an enabler for some of the AR use cases, especially if you're there's no connectivity, or you need something very strong, size-wise or security and things like that. So 5G is definitely one of the potential benefits or enablers for AR in the future.
Yeah, we've got from a regional perspective, and I've got a question here from Dominic, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to pop it to a higher level. It says, being from South Africa, what do you estimate is the probability of AR benefiting the African continent and being affordable for organizations within Africa? So that's kind of a big question, but maybe if we boil that down, what are we seeing regionally around the world? Are there any areas that are starting to pick up and adopt more that you three have seen than other regions, or even manufacturing sector, or I should say industry sectors? I'll say John B, if you want to, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Mark too.
Yeah, interesting question. We actually talked to Africa a little bit, and oil and gas industry. I know it's, we all hope it's going to potentially decline. But the oil and gas industry is a very innovative industry, and it has a lot of problems that AR can solve. It has a lot of remote sites. It has a lot of equipment that needs maintenance, potentially dangerous methane emissions. So we've seen activity in South Africa and Nigeria, and across North Africa in the oil and gas space with augmented reality. And I have to say, they don't have the bandwidth problems because they tend to be out in the open, and
Right.
either they've got a decent cellular connection, or eventually we hope Elon Musk will deliver Starlink. So I think Africa's probably going to benefit in the oil and gas industry first, and then other remote facilities that can use this technology. Because the continent's so huge, it's going to have a lot of remote places. Obviously, it's an economic thing as well as money and time and expertise, but I definitely think there's use cases in Africa that benefited from AR today.
I'm going to slippery shoulder this a little bit, Greg, to be honest. It's my stock answer that actually, and I'm lucky enough, the area is a kind of global organization. So I get to speak to people across the world, both from the providers of technologies and the companies deploying it. And I don't see a particular industry. I don't see a particular region in the world. It's all about the business problems that are being solved. Okay, going back to the use cases, and they're very similar. You can have a manufacturing company, a medical company, an automotive company. The problems are often the same. And we talked about remote assistance, and we talked about digital twins. So I do see there's more happening at the moment in Europe and in the US, and seeing, quite interestingly, there's obviously quite a few providers in the US, but around some of the Scandinavian countries as well, there's a little bit of a hotbed of AR developers, mainly because I think they've lost out a little bit on the mobile space and stuff like that. But when it comes to the actual companies deploying it, I don't see a kind of rhyme and reason. Our area members are utilities, automotive, aerospace, all sorts of different ones. So I normally say, well, I can see at the moment, you can deploy it. It's all about the problems that you solved, not particularly your industry you're in or the region that you live in.
When we had talked before around opportunities for collaboration that AR may offer, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, are there certain things within organizations that get opened up because you now have this capability? Maybe I think this came one of our conversations when we were prepping for this. John B, if you had a thought on that.
So I think collaboration isn't just AR. I mean, collaborate in other ways, obviously, starting with Zoom and going up the technology tree from there.
Mm-hmm.
I think AR gives you a very, very rich environment to collaborate in. If you can make a piece of equipment appear on the factory floor, and then somebody remotely can go, okay, let me show you inside this thing. Let me show you how this valve fits with this pipe. Now I'm going to show you and we've got real-time IoT data coming into that thing at the same time. Oh, look, the pressure's dropping. I mean, that's an incredibly rich way to collaborate. And you can't do it in VR because you can't be on the factory floor wearing a VR headset. Doing that in AR, and it blows people's minds the first time they see it, because it is pretty compelling. So I think for us personally, the company, the stuff we work on, that is what we do. It's collaboration in AR. There's lots of other use cases, but for us, that's an incredibly rich one.
I think that video you popped into the chat actually gives an example of that too. So once again,
I'll put it in again. What the hell?
I might have gotten buried there, so go right ahead.
But I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with John B. It's also one of those things that to experience it, really, I can almost see a light bulb going off in people's heads when they actually experience this. And that's one of the downsides of the COVID bit, is not being able to kind of meet up and get devices on people's head. But when they do it, you can see their brain going, oh, and I can do this and I can do that. And I can now collaborate with my supply chain. That brings that all closer together. We don't have those problems where we've done a design and it doesn't fit in somewhere, or it's not, doesn't collaborate with something else and stuff like that. It's so powerful. It's unbelievable.
That's a great point, and it's maybe even to elaborate on that even further. I mean, what have we seen that, and I know it's a broken record, the pandemic and COVID, but what has been catalyzed because of that? Has that driven this industry forward faster? Any thoughts on that? Like what are some of the positive outcomes of what we've all been trudging through for the past 18 months? Any thoughts on that, John Jay? You've been quiet over there, so I'll pick on you for a minute.
We're more of the rubber hits the road out in the field, but what you try to do is look ahead. And I was just looking at all the different chat comments and questions and how you get this thing launched, or how do you get it past pilot purgatory? And I think you want to set yourself up for success. So you want to maybe do less than more at first and really prove the use case of it. And already in this discussion, and then just looking at these videos, which I shouldn't be distracted by, but you can see that the use case immediately in training and remote assist makes sense. And we talked about hands-free, but also when someone, and possibly this could be a bot or an algorithm, can help see what you're working on. That speed and efficiency is where AR pulls ahead of conventional methods, because it sees that you're working on this. It knows to pull up the diagrams of immediately what you want. And we build a lot of these large data centers too. And when you go to activate, it's difficult because on the single line diagram, it doesn't show you all the controls and all the features that really should be on a diagram. But yet through AR, you could do multiple layers of things to show not just the power, if it's coming in from multiple sources, but the controls and even the things to look out for. And then if we can get to the point where it recognizes hazards, to say, hey, if you can't approach that, like if you have a Gauss meter, some way of detecting current as well as voltage, you would know then to use a robot to flip the breaker rather than a person. And even then we were considering, this was a discussion we had just before, how do you really make absolutely sure before you have a machine going through the breaker that you're not going to blow up something? And I think that though, through a combination of AR and through sophisticated algorithms, it can rifle through what can go wrong so much faster than the human mind could. That's again where the advantages are. When it gets complicated, when it's dangerous, and when it's repetitive. And that's where I think the value in these things is really going to proliferate beyond just pilot purgatory, because it becomes essential to prevention of injury.
Add on to John's kind of comments there, and I've been watching it as it's going through the chat. John started off with the training kind of use case as well, and I think, kind of adding on to that, the danger bit, it's also about capturing the information of the experts who have been, on the shop floor or wherever they're doing, and being able to capture that information, into the AR part. Mm-hmm. So suddenly now you've got years and years of experience. You've captured that. And then the flip side, what we're also seeing, especially with the kind of organizations with an older age profile, and I think, again, some of the comments are referring to this, that it actually encourages the next set of workers to come into the manufacturing space, because now they're using kind of cool headsets and they're using digital technology and things like that. So, another real big benefit is capturing the information that you've had for years, but then bringing the next set of people and getting them. I've said it a number of times, I'd like to write a paper that actually the term training, I think, could change. What you're doing is you're doing the job straight away. You're becoming effective almost immediately. It's no training isn't a thing. It's
immersive guiding. You're immersively guiding someone to go right into doing something because you have trust in who's guiding you.
Absolutely. And imagine the kind of savings, how long it is to get a person effective on a manufacturing kind of floor. Well, you've cut that time to potentially zero, and again, that's all savings and ROI. So
we've seen those use cases actually in movies. Like you watch this Mars thing, or the guy knows he goes out there and he's going to be fed data as he's preparing to go do the task. That's what AR can give you. It's a reality that's available today. We practitioners, though, have to learn how to use it and repeat it and start actually making money with it rather than just spending money. That's our challenge.
Yeah, on the COVID front, I would definitely say cutting down on maintenance staff's travel. That's a very specific use case. Came up with a company I was talking to who make plastic extrusion machinery, deploy them all around the world, and literally they have maintenance staff on planes all the time, going everywhere to fix these things and maintain these things. If they could cut that back 20%, 30%, 40%, it's a lot of money, but it's also a lot of worker safety. I mean, they don't want to put people on planes and hotels and have them to go through quarantine time after time after time.
And you've talked about your use case, though. That was extrusion machines, correct? It was.
Yeah.
I've seen that. ThyssenKrupp uses that effectively for field measuring before they build the stairs and elaborate machines. Rather than bending it and running back to the plant to make a part, they could just do it right then and there through a headset. Yeah, I think that you're onto it. That's where the gold is. If we're mining gold, that's where it's going to happen.
But you're cutting costs. You're also pushing it down too, right? I mean, you're in the current and past states of the union, you needed to send somebody into the field, but they needed to be an expert, right? So now you may be able to send someone who's not necessarily a novice, but somebody who's less skilled. And if you've got the ability to pull that thing up on both ends of the conversation and reference and point and guide them through it, I mean, that's huge. That's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, factories have maintenance staff in the factory, but they're not going to be expert in every single machine in that factory. They're going to have good knowledge, but they don't know, exactly which piece of the thing needs to be maintained when it goes wrong. So, you have an expert, but that expert is remote, and there's a lot of downtime because the expert takes time to get there. If you can start to cut that back, it's more safe, but it's also going to obviously save a lot of time and money. And if a line goes down, what are we talking? Tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour.
Oh, more than that. Yeah.
Lots. Patrick's got an interesting nuance to this in terms of education. He's talking about, as you think about working with university students, is this a recruiting tool? Is this something to, he quotes the Oldsmobile's tagline, "This is not your grandfather's or grandmother's manufacturing any longer." So how do you leverage AR and VR in a way to attract new students and build programs around that? Are you guys seeing any activity at the university level or the tech schools, trade schools? Talk to us, Mark. What are you seeing?
Yeah, you know better, Mark.
Yeah, lots, across the world. Partly as a kind of a supporting educational tool, but also, universities understanding it. This is the kind of future of the workspace and the workplace to a certain extent. So, within the area, again, we have a program about what we call the AR skills gap. It's even now, and probably John and John may have had to recruit people. It's kind of difficult, both from a technical perspective, but also a business perspective. So, we're trying to help those universities by offering anything from guest lecturing to setting them challenges to connecting with kind of industry companies, so that people really, or the students, get an understanding not just of the technology, but how it's implemented and some of the challenges and benefits that we've been talking about as well. So, is it everywhere? No. Are there some universities that are really focusing on this and other immersive technology? Yeah, definitely, and able to provide really good kind of services and courses. So I'd like to see more of that, because we need more skilled workers in the industries. If they get a choice, John B talked about Unity and Unreal. Yeah, the kind of normal path for that is they'll go off and do gaming. Yeah, and we actually want them to come into this industry. So yeah, there's things we can all do, and definitely talk about some of the kind of benefits and the challenges. But yeah, there's definitely a move towards universities more involved in this technology.
We recruit a lot of ex-game developers. There's a lot of people who do 5-7 years in game development. Then they realize they've actually got to support themselves and maybe support the family. And very few game developers are making a lot of money. So it's a rich source of recruitment for us.
We just toured the University of Michigan's robotics lab, and we were lucky enough to build a building for these guys. So now that it's being used, the experimentation is really migrating, and a lot of the research students who were previous gamers, you see them really getting involved in what robots can do. And it is becoming very immersive. I also have a niece that is one of the lucky few that got an Amazon robotics scholarship, Bianca, and she's telling me that it's really centering on it's way beyond the hardware, and it's writing these scripts and routines to really capture and quickly catch up to what factory and automation needs. So this will be this revolution that's occurring in the next few years. It'll be very exciting to see what happens.
So what other success stories can you three share with us in terms of implementations or things that have gone well that driving the industry forward? Maybe John B. I know when we talked earlier, I thought you'd had a couple examples around not just the tech, but also in some of the employee and engagement and workforce, things along those lines too.
Yeah, the biggest barrier, and I think Mark touched on it earlier, is you've got to change working practices. So you can deliver these tools, but you can't make people use them. And getting through that, and actually, I think the younger generation coming through will solve that problem. But we still run into it where the head of everyone thinks it's a great idea, but the head of maintenance is like, we're not using this,
Right.
So getting past that is probably, it's not really, I sort of flipped it around. I mean, I guess that's more of a barrier, but if you can get past that, that generates a success story. I don't think people should underestimate getting this across an organization is a challenge. But if you can solve that problem and get people in the field to buy into using it, that will generate success stories, and we have seen that happen. We have seen it started in training, and then it by osmosis spread out into maintenance.
Great. Marcus has got a question. Or you had a comment, Mark? Go ahead before I switch.
Well, and again, just to help some of kind of the area members, just to give kind of a few ideas, but companies like Newport News Shipbuilding make those big aircraft carriers. They had a 96% saving on when they were reviewing the work that was done to build, the kind of different components or the different spaces within an aircraft carrier. So previously they had a piece of paper and they're looking up and down and kind of checking out. Now they just bring a tablet, AR overlay. Is that right? Perfect. Right. So, from something like, let me get this right, 35 hours to 96, to a number, I can't remember the math, but basically that Boeing had done lots with wiring within aircrafts as well. So again, they're using AR normally they'd have a physical model that they have to kind of poke the wires through, very time consuming, really difficult. And they're using AR to do that. Xerox, there's a whole bunch of companies that are doing stuff on remote assistance. Bosch, with all the new cars, electric cars they have to support, using AR to be able to show the kind of workers what they need to do and get that relevant and contextual information. So it's one of the things that, and I've mentioned before, the use cases kind of, we're beginning to define them a lot better, but people want to see case studies. I'm sure all the listeners out there want to see real companies doing real stuff here. And that's one of the things we're trying to do in the area, is to get as many case studies so people can see. It helps with that convincing the C-suite or convincing whoever. If you see another company that's actually made benefits and savings, yeah, that's great. And I ask anybody out there, if they are doing stuff, please promote it. It really helps the industry. And combining, the IoT, AI and AR together to show real savings there, it makes a world of difference.
That's staggering. You said 96%. That's huge. That's It's a massive amount of savings. I did a double take when you said that number.
Well, sorry, just one, Lockheed Martin, being a kind of area member, and it was an actually 99% saving. And there's a few you can probably look at. A lady called Shelley Peterson. She's a real expert in this space. She said she had more trouble convincing people that they'd made a 99% saving than people would actually, doing the AR part, because people just didn't get it. But she, done all the calculations and had a very clear picture of how they'd done it. So there are substantial savings. It does take time. It does take effort, and it's not totally simple, but there are companies making substantial savings. And I can see a whole bunch of comments about, how'd you get started and things like that. But companies are making real savings.
We've had success in, again, when you walk into an equipment room and putting on a headset and it's recognizing symbols and it's telling you where valves and tags are, and it's taking that complex diagram that's on the wall and projecting it in your headset and showing you where to find things. So we've actually done that in mechanical rooms and for fire water pump rooms and rooms where the people that are running the rooms are changing regularly and they need to be constantly changed. That's where we found value.
Yeah, Cliff's got a question. I think it's actually embedded in the chat. Just remind everybody, throw the questions in the Q&A because we're juggling a few windows here. This is basically making the statement we've been talking about these types of cases in manufacturing for years. However, the technology is still relatively slow to be adopted. So crystal ball time again, what do you think will be the breakthrough application to really capture the imagination and, more importantly, the financial backing of the C-suite? So any suggestions along that line, or where you think that golden nugget may be hiding?
I think the technology's there and the business cases are there. The other element is executive and buy-in all the way down the organization, and that's been a huge challenge we've seen. It's real hard to change working practices once they're established. So that's been a big part, I think, of the slowness of adoption. I think the technology is there. You can do AR, you can do it well, and you can get ROIs, but you've got to get buy-in for multiple stakeholders, and that has been the biggest barrier we've seen.
Agreed.
Again, going back to my start small, but try and get as many people in that experience as possible. Work with the likes of kind of John's company and other companies, but as soon as you get people to see it, I do see that light bulb moment. I know, and again, one of the area members, he said that the thing that really captured it for us is when the CTO put it on his head. He said he was on the telephone within 5 minutes to the CEO saying, "You've got to come and see this, and this is going to make a real difference to our company."
Yeah, getting that top buy-in like that is huge. That's a huge, powerful aspect. And
all the way down. Don't just get the top buy-in, because the guy who runs maintenance will still kill it if he tries hard enough.
Very true. Good point. It's got to matriculate all the way through. Yeah, I'm going to throw this one out there just because I think it's a good point. We've been talking about ROI. Lubos, and if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But Lubos is saying, how do you make ROI calculations on an AR deployment on the manufacturing floor? So, he's just looking for a little bit of guidance, I think. What aspects are coming into the calculations?
We use an A3 method that's similar to Toyota, where you look at all the options. What is the root challenge? Why are you doing this? And not just the short-term spend, what's the long-term value going to be? So like if you improve training, for instance, and you're doing it with tens of hundreds of workers, and all of a sudden it shaves a little bit of time getting to work and doing the right thing right away, or the person doesn't have to fly out there or drive way out there in some large facility. That's where the return on investment is pretty easy to calculate, because you can say the average time, what it cost a worker, and you can start working the math to say that this is where we should do an investment. But if you want immediate return on investment, it takes time to work out the bugs, but what you want to do is focus on where the longer term value of this is. It's not, and know that the vendors and the technology is going to change as you work on it. But the efficiency of having comprehensive data when you're working on something complicated cannot be ignored. So if you think of it in terms of that way with executives, having everything at your fingertips could be safer and really more comprehensive training and more of a valuable way of just working efficiently. I think we talked about the fact that you don't actually have to know what you're doing if you have somebody online that can really help you, that who knows what they're doing. Similar to remote assistance with IT, right? They're going to help you stop the phishing attack or your blue screen of death happening. So if you trust who's giving you the information, it's just it's a much more powerful way of working.
Fantastic. I know there's a couple questions in here, and we've put a lot of links in the chat. So I know a few people have asked this, and just to reiterate, they're embedded on that right-hand side. So if you pull that chat bubble up, that's where you can get at these. And I'm quite sure we'll publish something after the fact too, that you can get a hold of us. And you can, of course, reach out to anyone on the panel here today, and we'd be happy to steer you to the appropriate person to get a deeper dive. So we're at about 12:55 right now. We're in the final wrap-ups. So I would like to just ask the panelists one last time, any parting thoughts or last pieces or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with the audience. So I'll start with you, John Jay. Anything that you'd like to share?
Know that the first time you run into these pilots, you're going to run into problems. So build in time to solve problems. It could just be Wi-Fi interference. How do you charge this thing? How do you get spare parts? So figure on a little bit extra time to get going. Then once you get going, think of the support that you need to give to get it from pilot purgatory into actually in implementation. Focus on that and be there shoulder to shoulder with whoever's testing, trying this. Don't just show this to them, get them working and run and leave them. You really got to be there with the pain that they're experiencing and make them feel comfortable. I think that comfort level, it's the human part, is the greater challenge in this. The technology's there. It's more confidence in building a team spirit and showing that you're properly supporting it correctly. That's what I'd leave you with.
Thank you. Mark, how about yourself with parting words?
Yeah, building on John's kind of bit, and I often try and use the phrase, I don't know if it says quite well, but you need to plan for a full deployment, but kind of deliver a prototype and continue to build on that. Okay, so take John's point, get as many of the right people, the safety, the security, the IT people, the actual workers, the senior management, get them all involved. So I'm kind of emphasizing what John said, because the change management part is important. I think showing people, we've mentioned it a few times through here, that's really important as well. So work with your kind of providers or build something, but actually show it, take it on a road trip, to the different bits and pieces. What you'll do is you get interesting feedback and thoughts. And yeah, kind of the other bit when it comes to deployment, and this is a great story from one of our members, work with the kind of gnarliest technophobe person in your organization. Because if you solve their problems, everything else is easier.
Yeah.
Terrific. John B., how about yourself? Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting time. I think we're living at the confluence of multiple technologies. You've got Industry 4.0, which is maturing, data coming from that. You've got the gaming industry now starting to deliver industrial solutions, which is going to make the hardware requirements of doing this stuff much lighter and make the actual interaction much more immersive. You've got the communication piece of 5G getting rolled out, Starlink's turning up. So multiple forces are kind of gathering. All these technologies have been maturing on their own, but I think they're coming together in a really, really interesting way. Who knew that gaming technology plus IoT data plus a headset would be a thing 5 years ago? That was on the radar. That's a thing today. You can do that.
It's amazing. John B., John J., Mark, thank you all for sharing your insights, your expertise, and your perspectives this afternoon. A terrific conversation. And I personally learned a lot, and I think the audience did too. Thank you again to our sponsors, Edolis, Fortinet, Hitachi Vantara, HiveMQ, Fulcrum, Eurotech, Keyfactor, Machine Metrics, Litmus, Vertex, Trend Micro, Siemens, Upkeep, Versaleo, and Ubuntu. Your support ensures that we have all this great content to share, so thank you. And a special thanks to all of you attending this afternoon or this morning or this evening, where you happen to be logging in from. But we appreciate you making the time to be here and for your great questions that you've contributed. So it's now time to move on to our next session, which is going to be starting at the top of the hour. That's entitled How Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning is Transforming Manufacturing. This is a great complement to the dialogue that we just had here. So once again, thank you for joining today and enjoy the rest of your time here.
Thanks, Greg.